For Maya Vance, the cold was a persistent predator. She pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her shoulders, but her priority wasn't her own warmth. It was the 6-year-old boy huddled against her side. "Just a little further, Leo," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "We just need to get inside the lobby. It's warm there." Leo didn't complain. At 6, he had learned the silence of the displaced. He clutched his backpack, the only home he had left, and followed his mother toward the towering glass monolith of Miller Roche Financial. It was 5:30 p.m. The sun was dipping below the skyline, painting the skyscrapers in shades of bruised purple and gold. Maya didn't look like she belonged there. Her shoes were scuffed, her jeans faded, and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of nights spent in a rusted sedan until the heater finally gave out. But in her hand, she held something she treated like a holy relic, a manila folder. Inside was a single crisp sheet of paper, her resume. "Stay behind the large planter, Leo," she instructed as they slipped through the heavy revolving doors. The warmth of the lobby hit them like a physical embrace. "If the security guard sees us staying too long, he'll ask us to leave. Just pretend we're waiting for someone." Maya found a plush bench in the far corner of the mezzanine, partially hidden by a decorative marble pillar. She sat down, feeling the ache in her bones begin to thaw. This was her last shot. She had been an executive assistant at a top firm in Seattle before the medical bills from her late husband's illness swallowed their savings, their home, and eventually, her stability. She opened the folder. The paper was perfect, white, 24LB bond, professional. It was her ticket back to humanity. She had spent her last $5 at a public library to print 10 copies. This was the last one. "Mom, I'm hungry," Leo whispered, his stomach letting out a soft growl that broke Maya's heart. "I know, baby. As soon as I drop this off at the HR drop box, we'll go to the shelter for dinner, I promise." But the warmth was intoxicating. The soft ambient music playing through the hidden speakers, the rhythmic clicking of heels on marble, the muffled roar of the city outside. It felt like a dream. Maya leaned her head back against the cold marble pillar, just for a second. She felt Leo's head rest on her lap. She gripped the manila folder tightly against her chest, her fingers interlocking over the name printed at the top. Maya Vance. She told herself she would just close her eyes for a minute. Just a minute to stop the world from spinning. She didn't hear the elevators chime. She didn't see the crowds of employees thinning out as the clock struck 6:30. And she certainly didn't see Julian Roche, the chief financial officer of the firm, stepping out of his private elevator, his brow furrowed over a legal brief. Julian was a man of logic and numbers. He lived in a world of spreadsheets, acquisitions, and cold hard facts. But as he crossed the lobby to head to his car, something caught his eye. In the corner of the mezzanine, where the shadows were longest, sat a woman and a child. He stopped. He wasn't a man who usually noticed the invisible people of the city, not out of malice, but out of the sheer velocity of his life. But there was something about the way she held that folder. It wasn't a bag of belongings, it was a shield. He walked closer, his leather Oxfords silent on the carpeted section of the floor. He saw the child's small hand gripping the woman's sleeve. He saw the woman's face, pale, exhausted, but possessing a refined grace that even poverty couldn't erase. As she breathed in her sleep, the folder slipped slightly. Julian reached out, intending to catch it before it hit the floor. As he took the folder, the resume slid out. He glanced at it, expecting a plea for money or a handwritten note. Instead, he saw a perfectly formatted professional history. Maya Vance. Honors graduate. 5 years experience. Expert in forensic accounting and administrative management. Julian looked from the paper to the woman sleeping on a public bench in his lobby. The math didn't add up. Why was a woman with these credentials sleeping in a lobby in the middle of winter? He looked at his watch. His driver was waiting. He had a gala to attend, but for the first time in 10 years, the numbers didn't matter. The person did. Julian pulled a gold pen from his breast pocket. He didn't wake her. Instead, he sat on the edge of the adjacent chair, pulled a notepad from his briefcase, and began to write. Julian Roche was not a sentimental man. In the boardroom, he was known as the Glacier, cool, immovable, and devastatingly efficient. But as he stood over Maya Vance, The logic he lived by felt hollow. He looked at her resume again. She wasn't just qualified. She had been the right hand to a CEO in Seattle who Julian personally respected. He realized she wasn't looking for a handout. She was looking for a doorway. Instead of calling security, Julian sat on the edge of the leather chair opposite her. He took his fountain pen, the one he used to sign multi-million-dollar mergers, and wrote directly on the bottom of her resume in bold, elegant script. Report to the 42nd floor at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Ask for Julian. Don't be late. He then took a $100 bill from his wallet, tucked it inside the folder so it wouldn't be visible to passers-by, and placed the folder back into her limp hands. He signaled to the night security guard, a man named Marcus, who had worked there for 20 years. "Marcus," Julian said quietly, gesturing toward the sleeping pair. "I'm sorry, Mr. Roche," Marcus began, reaching for his radio. "I'll have them cleared out right away." "No," Julian interrupted, his voice firm. "Let them stay until the building closes at midnight. If they wake up before then, tell them the cafe in the lobby left some sandwiches for priority guests. Take care of it. Put it on my tab." Marcus blinked, stunned. "Yes, sir, of course." Julian walked out into the biting Chicago night, the image of the boy's small shoes, worn at the toes, burned into his mind. Around 10:15 p.m., Maya jolted awake. The lobby was dim, the bustling crowds gone. Panic surged through her. Leo. She looked down. He was still asleep, his head heavy on her thigh. She gripped her folder, terrified that someone had stolen her only hope. As she opened the folder to check her resume, the $100 bill fluttered out like a fallen leaf. Her heart hammered. Then, she saw the gold ink. Report to the 42nd floor. Julian. She gasped, covering her mouth to stifle a sob. She didn't know who Julian was, but she knew the 42nd floor was the executive suite. "Mom?" Leo stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Is it time to go?" "Leo," she whispered, tears blurring her vision as she showed him the bill. "We're going to eat. A real dinner. And tomorrow might be the day everything changes." The next morning was a blur of frantic preparation. Maya used the money with surgical precision. She found a 24-hour laundromat to wash her best blouse and slacks, drying them until the wrinkles faded. She paid for a day pass at a local YMCA, allowing her and Leo to shower. She stood before the cracked mirror in the gym locker room. She used a small sewing kit to fix the hem of her trousers. She tied her hair back into a tight, professional bun. She looked like the woman she used to be, a woman who managed schedules and navigated corporate politics. But her hands were shaking. "You stay in the lobby with Marcus," Maya told Leo as they stood outside Miller Roche at 7:45 a.m. Marcus, the guard from the night before, gave them a small knowing nod. He had a bag of apple slices and a juice box waiting for the boy. "I'll be brave, Mom," Leo said, sitting on the same bench from the night before. Maya stepped into the elevator. As the floors ticked up, 20, 30, 40, the pressure in her chest grew. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, she was met by a wall of glass and polished mahogany. A sleek receptionist looked up, her expression skeptical, as she took in Maya's slightly oversized coat. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Julian," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Roche, do you have an appointment?" "He left me a note," Maya said, presenting the resume with the gold ink. The receptionist's eyes widened. She recognized the handwriting immediately. "One moment, please." 5 minutes later, Maya was ushered into a corner office that overlooked Lake Michigan. The view was breathtaking, but Maya's eyes were fixed on the man sitting behind the desk. He looked younger than she expected, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see through walls. "Maya Vance," Julian said, not looking up from his tablet. "Sit down." Maya sat. She didn't fidget. She waited. "I called your former employer in Seattle this morning," Julian continued, finally looking at her. "He spoke very highly of you. He also mentioned he lost touch with you after your husband passed. He didn't realize things had become difficult." "I didn't want a handout then, Mr. Roche," Maya said quietly. "And I don't want one now. I want to work." Julian leaned back. "I don't give handouts. I give opportunities to people who can generate value. My senior analyst quit yesterday. It's a high-pressure role. If you fail, I'll fire you without hesitation. Do you understand? I won't fail, Maya promised. The first week was a trial by fire. Julian didn't make it easy for her. He loaded her with back-to-back reports, complex data sets, and a schedule that would break a normal person. He was testing her, seeing if the homeless mom had the grit to survive the glacier's expectations. Maya worked like a woman possessed. She stayed late, though Julian didn't know she was staying late because she still didn't have a permanent home. She used her first week's advance, which Julian had insisted on for wardrobe expenses, to secure a small, cramped room in a safe residential hotel. It wasn't much, but it had a lock and a bed for Leo. However, the corporate world wasn't all welcoming. Sarah, a junior partner who had eyes on the senior analyst position, viewed Maya as an intruder. "Where did you come from anyway?" Sarah asked one afternoon by the coffee machine, her eyes scanning Maya's bargain store blazer. "You just appeared out of nowhere. No LinkedIn update, no headhunter. It's almost like you were a ghost." "I've been away from the industry for a while," Maya replied professionally. "Family matters." "Right," Sarah sneered. "Well, just a heads up. Julian is obsessed with results. He doesn't care about stories or struggles. If you drop a single decimal point, you're done." Maya felt the sting of the comment, but she didn't let it show. She went back to her desk and double-checked the quarterly projections for the fourth time. That evening, as the office emptied, Julian walked past her desk. He noticed a small, hand-drawn picture of a superhero taped to her monitor. It was Leo's drawing. "Your son?" Julian asked. "Yes. His name is Leo." "He draws well," Julian said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "He's been waiting in the lobby every day, Maya. Marcus tells me he's very well behaved. But a lobby is no place for a child." "I'm working on it, sir," Maya said, her heart sinking. She feared he was about to tell her she couldn't bring him anymore. "There's a daycare center on the 5th floor for our employees," Julian said. "I've authorized a spot for him. It's deducted from your benefits package, so it's not a gift. It's for efficiency. You'll work better if you aren't worried about him sitting in a lobby." Maya looked at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Julian." "Get back to work, Vance," he said, turning away so she wouldn't see the small smile tugging at his lips. The stability Maya was building was fragile. Just as she was beginning to feel human again, the reality of her past came knocking. The hotel she was staying at was in a rough part of town, the only place she could afford on an advance. One Tuesday night, as she and Leo were walking from the train station, a group of teenagers started hassling them. Maya clutched her bag, her heart racing. They escaped into the hotel, but the incident left Leo terrified. He wouldn't stop crying, and he developed a fever by midnight. The next morning, Maya was exhausted. She had stayed up all night with Leo, using cold compresses to break his fever. She couldn't leave him alone in the hotel, and the 5th floor daycare didn't accept sick children. She had a choice: stay with her son and risk the job that was saving their lives, or leave him. It wasn't a choice at all. She called the office. "Mr. Roche, I can't come in this morning. My son is ill." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "We have the Harrington presentation at 10 a.m., Maya. You have the files." "I can email them. I can join via Zoom. But I can't leave him," Maya said, her voice trembling. "You knew the stakes," Julian said, his voice returning to the glacier tone. "If you aren't here for the Harrington meeting, don't bother coming in at all." The line went dead. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still in her hand. The cold reality of the world crashed back down. To Julian, she was just another employee. To her, he had been a savior. Now she was back to being a woman on the edge of a cliff. But Maya Vance didn't give up. She opened her laptop. If she was going to go down, she would go down fighting. She spent the next 3 hours perfecting the presentation, adding insights that Julian hadn't even thought of. She sent the file at 9:55 a.m. with a note: "Even if I'm not there, these numbers will win the contract. Goodbye, Julian." She closed her laptop and hugged her sleeping son, bracing for the inevitable return to the shelter. At 11:30 a.m., there was a sharp knock on the door of her dingy hotel room. Maya jumped, thinking it was the landlord coming for the next week's rent she didn't have yet. She opened the door and gasped. Julian Roche stood in the hallway, looking completely out of place in his $3,000 suit against the peeling wallpaper, and the smell of stale cigarettes. Behind him was a woman in a medical uniform. "Mr. Roche, what are you doing here?" "You left your address on your HR forms," Julian said, his eyes scanning the cramped, dark room with an expression of suppressed anger. Not at her, but at the conditions she was living in. "And you were right. The Harrington presentation was perfect. We won the contract." He stepped aside to let the woman enter. "This is Dr. Aris. She's a private pediatrician. She's going to look at Leo." I can't afford this," Maya whispered. "The company covers emergency family wellness for senior staff," Julian lied smoothly. He walked over to the window, looking out at the brick wall of the neighboring building. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad, Maya?" "Because I wanted you to see a professional, not a victim," she replied, her voice filled with pride. Julian turned around. For the first time, the glacier seemed to melt. "I saw a woman who worked 20 hours a day while living in a place that barely has heat. That's not a victim, Maya. That's a warrior." He handed her a set of keys. "The firm keeps a corporate apartment near the office for visiting executives. It's currently empty. You and Leo are moving in tonight. It's part of your relocation package." "Julian, I can't keep accepting." "It's not a gift," he snapped, though his eyes were kind. "It's an investment. I can't have my best analyst losing sleep because she's worried about her safety. Move in. Get the boy healthy. I expect you back in the office on Monday." Life in the corporate apartment was a dream. For the first time in years, Maya felt a sense of peace. Leo had his own room, and the daycare on the 5th floor became his favorite place. Maya's work continued to impress, and her relationship with Julian grew into a silent, mutual respect, and perhaps something more. But as Maya's star rose, Sarah's resentment boiled over. Sarah had been digging. She didn't believe the relocation story. She hired a private investigator to look into Maya's background. One Monday morning, Maya walked into the break room to find a group of colleagues whispering. As she entered, they went silent. Taped to the refrigerator was a printout of a news article from Seattle. "Local woman evicted following husband's death. Claims medical bankruptcy." Below it, someone had scrawled in red marker, "From the streets to the suite. Who did she sleep with?" Maya felt the blood drain from her face. The shame she had fought so hard to bury was now public gossip. She walked straight to Julian's office. She didn't knock. "Did you see it?" she asked, her voice shaking. Julian looked up from his desk. He had a copy of the paper in his hand. He looked furious. "I saw it," he said. "I should leave," Maya said, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm a distraction. I'm the homeless girl. I'll never be seen as an equal here." Julian stood up and walked around his desk. He stood inches from her. "Is that what you think you are? A distraction?" "That's what they think." "I don't care what they think," Julian said. "And neither should you. You earned your seat at the table. If they can't handle your journey, that's their failure, not yours." He walked to the intercom. "Attention all staff, this is Julian Roche. There is a defamatory flyer in the break room. Whoever is responsible has until 5 p.m. to confess to HR. If no one confesses, I will review the security footage, and the person responsible will be fired and sued for harassment. Miller Roche is a place of excellence, not petty cruelty." The office went silent. Maya looked at Julian, overwhelmed by his protection. Sarah didn't confess. Instead, she doubled down. She knew Julian was protective of Maya, so she decided to strike where it hurt most: the work. That week, the firm was preparing for its annual audit. Maya was in charge of the final reconciliation. On Thursday evening, Maya finished the report and saved it to the secure server. Late that night, Sarah used her administrative bypass to access the file. She changed a few key formulas, subtle enough to look like a careless error, but large enough to create a $2 million discrepancy in the final audit. The next morning, the auditors arrived. Julian sat in the boardroom, confident. "The reconciliation is perfect," Julian told the lead auditor. "Maya Vance handled it." 30 minutes later, the auditor looked up, frowning. "Mr. Roche, we have a problem. The projections don't match the cash flow. There's a massive error in the formulas. If we submit this, the SEC will flag us for fraud." Julian's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Maya, who was sitting in the corner. She looked confused. That's impossible, Maya said, stepping forward. I checked those formulas 10 times. The logs show you were the last one to save the file, Maya, the auditor said. Sarah, sitting across the table, sighed theatrically. I suppose that's what happens when you hire someone who's been out of the loop for so long. The pressure must have been too much. Julian looked at Maya. For a moment she saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It hurt worse than any insult. Leave the room, Julian said quietly. All of you, except Maya. When the door closed, Julian turned to Maya. Tell me the truth. I didn't make that mistake, Julian. I swear to you, I'm a forensic accountant by training. I don't miss formulas like that. The logs don't lie, Maya. It was saved under your ID at 8:00 p.m. Wait, Maya said, her mind racing. I left at 7:30 p.m. to pick up Leo from daycare. I remember because Marcus waved me out. Julian's eyes sharpened. He picked up his phone. Marcus, I need the mezzanine and 42nd floor exit logs for yesterday between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. now. While they waited, Maya opened the file on the big screen. She started deconstructing the formulas. Look here, she pointed to the screen. The error isn't a typo. It's a sophisticated override. Someone wanted this to be found. If I was just incompetent, the error would be messy. This is clean. This is intentional. Marcus walked in with a tablet. Mr. Roach, Maya Vance clocked out at 7:32 p.m., but someone used a terminal on the 42nd floor at 8:05 p.m. The security camera in the hallway shows Sarah Miller entering the suite using a master key. The silence in the room was heavy. Julian's face turned to stone. Maya, Julian said, his voice low. Go to my office. Wait for me there. Julian walked back into the main office floor. He didn't go to Sarah's desk. He went to the center of the room and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Sarah Miller, pack your things. Security will escort you out. The police will be contacted regarding corporate sabotage and attempted fraud. Sarah turned pale. Julian, it was just a joke. I was trying to show she wasn't right for the... You tried to ruin a woman's life to satisfy your ego, Julian said. You're lucky I don't have you arrested right now. Get out. A month later, the scandal had faded. Maya was no longer the homeless girl. She was the hero who had saved the firm from a fraudulent audit. She had been promoted to vice president of analytics. It was the night of the Miller-Roche annual gala. Maya stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment. She wore a deep emerald gown, not a handout, but something she had bought with her own hard-earned salary. Leo was with a trusted sitter, dressed in a tiny tuxedo, proud of his working mom. When she arrived at the gala, the room went quiet. She was radiant. Julian approached her, looking striking in a black tuxedo. He handed her a glass of champagne. You look incredible, he said, his usual composure wavering. I feel incredible, Maya said. Thank you for the note, Julian, the one with the gold ink. I should confess, Julian said, stepping closer as the music swelled into a waltz. I didn't just leave that note because of your resume. I left it because I saw the way you held your son. I realized that if you could fight that hard for him, you would be the most loyal person I'd ever hire. I was right. You saved us, she whispered. No, Julian corrected her, taking her hand. You saved yourself. I just opened the door. Maya, I've spent my life looking at numbers, but you're the only person who has ever made the math feel like it finally adds up. They danced, and for the first time in years, Maya didn't feel like she was running from a storm. She was exactly where she belonged. Months passed. Maya and Julian's relationship grew from a professional partnership into a deep, soulful romance. But they never forgot where they started. Maya approached Julian with a proposal. We have empty floors in 3 of our buildings across the country. I want to start the Miller-Vance Foundation. We provide transitional housing and job training for single parents with professional backgrounds who have hit rock bottom. Julian smiled, leaning over the blueprints she had laid out. It's not very profitable on paper, Maya. It's an investment in human capital, she countered, using his own words against him. I love it, he said, kissing her forehead. They launched the foundation, and the first person they hired to run the Chicago branch was Marcus, the security guard who had shown Maya kindness when she had nothing. The story of the homeless VP became an inspiration across the city. Maya wasn't ashamed of her past anymore. She wore it as armor. She spoke at universities and shelters, telling her story, not as a fairy tale, but as a testament to resilience and the power of a single person believing in another. 1 year after that cold night in the lobby, Maya and Julian stood on the balcony of their new home, overlooking the city skyline. Leo was playing in the living room, laughing as he built a sprawling city out of blocks. The snow was beginning to fall again, but this time, it didn't look like a predator. It looked like a celebration. Julian took a small box from his pocket. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, the woman who had fallen asleep in his lobby clutching a resume and who now held his heart. Maya Vance, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to write every chapter of it with you. He opened the box to reveal a ring that caught the light of the Chicago stars. Will you marry me? Maya looked at the man who had seen her at her lowest and helped her reach her highest. She looked at her son, safe and happy. She looked at her own hands, no longer shaking, but strong and capable. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times. Yes. As the clock struck midnight, marking the anniversary of their meeting, Maya realized that her resume hadn't just gotten her a job. It had led her to a life where she no longer had to survive. She could finally live. The girl who fell asleep in the lobby was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew that while the world can be cold, a single spark of kindness can start a fire that changes everything. The proposal wasn't just a romantic climax. It was a new beginning fraught with its own set of realistic challenges. As news of the engagement between the CFO and the Rise from the Ash VP broke, the media began to circle. Maya wasn't just a successful executive anymore. She was a headline. They're calling it a Cinderella story, Julian, Maya said, tossing a tabloid onto his mahogany desk. The headline read, From the pavement to the penthouse. Did the CFO buy his new bride? It devalues everything I worked for. It makes it sound like I traded a resume for a ring. Julian stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. The Chicago skyline was gray, a storm brewing over the lake. People love a simple narrative, Maya. They don't want to hear about the 18-hour days you spent fixing the audit. They want the fairy tale. But you and I know the truth. This firm wouldn't be standing after the sabotage attempt if not for your forensic skills. But Leo hears it too, Maya whispered, her voice trembling. The kids at his new school, they ask him if we lived in a car. He's starting to feel the shame I thought I'd buried. This was the realistic cost of success. The past never truly disappears. It just changes shape. The Miller-Vance Foundation was Maya's sole project, but the board of directors at Miller-Roche wasn't convinced. During a heated board meeting, a senior investor named Arthur Sterling challenged the ethics of the project. We are a financial institution, not a charity house, Sterling barked, his voice echoing in the sterile room. You're using company resources to house people with potential. But potential doesn't pay dividends. How do we know these people won't just disappear with the stipend? Maya stood at the head of the table. She didn't use a PowerPoint. She pulled out a worn, yellowed piece of paper. It was the original resume she had clutched while sleeping in the lobby. This piece of paper was potential, Maya said, her voice like steel. I had the skills, but I didn't have a shower. I had the intelligence, but I didn't have an address. When you deny someone a chance based on their current circumstances rather than their proven history, you aren't being fiscally responsible. You're being blind. We've already screened 20 candidates. 10 of them have CPA licenses. 5 are former project managers. They are us, Mr. Sterling. They are just us on a bad day. The room went silent. Julian watched her, his heart swelling with pride. She wasn't just surviving the corporate world. She was reforming it. Just as things seemed stable, a ghost from Maya's past arrived in Chicago. David Thorne, the brother of Maya's late husband, appeared at the office. David had been the one who turned his back on Maya when she was evicted, claiming his brother's debts were her problem. He sat in the lobby, the same lobby where Maya had once slept, looking smug. When Maya met him, the air felt thin. "What do you want, David?" "I saw you on the news," David said, leaning back. "Rich husband, fancy title. I think I deserve a piece of the pie. After all, it was my brother's life insurance that you mismanaged, wasn't it?" "I didn't mismanage it. It went to the hospital so he could die with dignity," Maya hissed. "That's not how the internet will see it if I tell my side," David threatened. "Give me 50,000 and I'll disappear." This was a realistic obstacle, the vultures that emerge when a person finds success. Maya felt the old panic rising, the feeling of being hunted. But she wasn't that woman in the car anymore. Maya didn't go to Julian for the money. She went to Marcus, the head of security. "Marcus, I need every record of David Thorne's contact with me since my husband's death." Using her forensic accounting skills, Maya didn't just look for records, she followed the money. She discovered that David had actually embezzled a small portion of her husband's estate before the bankruptcy was finalized. He wasn't there to collect. He was there because he was broke and desperate. She met him one last time at a crowded coffee shop. She pushed a folder across the table. "There's no money in here, David. There are bank statements. I know about the 5,000 you took from the trust. I could have you arrested for fraud tomorrow." David's face went ashen. "Leave Chicago. If you ever contact me or Leo again, I won't just call the police. I'll use every legal resource Miller Roche has to ensure you never hold a job again. Do you understand?" He left without a word. Maya sat there for a long time, her coffee getting cold. She had protected her family. The victim was dead. The protector had taken her place. The decision to hold the wedding in the lobby of Miller Roche sent shockwaves through the Chicago elite. The Gold Coast socialites whispered behind fans at charity luncheons, calling it eccentric or a publicity stunt. But for Maya, it was an act of reclamation. "You're sure about this?" Julian asked one evening, standing in the center of the vast, empty lobby after hours. The moonlight filtered through the towering glass panes, casting long skeletal shadows across the floor. "We could have the Amalfi Coast. We could have a castle in Scotland." Maya walked to the exact spot, the third marble pillar from the left, where she had once sat with a hungry child and a dying hope. She ran her hand over the cold stone. "Julian, this isn't just a lobby to me. It's where I died as a victim and was reborn as a professional. I want to walk down these stairs not as a girl being rescued, but as a woman who finally owns the space she once feared." Julian watched her, the harsh lines of his face softening. He understood. For him, this lobby was where his cold, calculated world of numbers had first been disrupted by the messy, beautiful reality of human life. "Then we'll turn this fortress into a sanctuary," he promised. The night of the wedding arrived in a flurry of snow and silk. The transformation was breathtaking. The usually sterile corporate environment was softened by thousands of white orchids and floating candles that seemed to hover in the air, reflected in the polished black marble floors. But the true beauty wasn't in the decor. It was in the guest list. On one side of the aisle sat the titans of industry, CEOs, senators, and investors in tailored tuxedos. On the other side sat the foundation guests. There was Elena, a former schoolteacher who had lost everything to medical debt, now working as the foundation's lead coordinator. There was Samuel, an Army veteran who had been sleeping under the Wacker Drive bridge, now dressed in a suit Maya had helped him pick out for his new job in logistics. Marcus, the security guard, stood at the front, wearing a suit that Julian had personally commissioned for him. He wasn't guarding the door tonight. He was a witness to the miracle he had helped facilitate by simply being kind. When the music shifted to a deep, resonant cello, Leo stepped out. He was 7 now, his face filled with a confidence that had been absent a year ago. He carried the rings on a velvet cushion, walking with a steady gaze. Then, Maya appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She didn't wear a traditional princess gown. She wore a sophisticated architectural dress of ivory silk that commanded respect. As she descended the stairs, she didn't look at the cameras or the billionaires. She looked at Julian, and then she looked at the pillar. The ceremony was brief, but visceral. When they exchanged vows, Julian's voice broke, a sound the corporate world never thought they'd hear from the glacier. "I used to think that the most valuable thing in this building was the capital in our vaults," Julian said, holding Maya's hands. "I was wrong. The most valuable thing in this building was the woman who had the courage to fall asleep here when she had nowhere else to go. You didn't just change my life, Maya. You gave this building a soul." Instead of a traditional reception, the evening turned into a massive fundraiser. By the time the cake was cut, over $3 million had been pledged to the Miller Vance Foundation. Maya stood in the center of the room, looking at the mix of people, the wealthy and the recovering, all sharing the same air, the same food, and the same hope. She realized that the glass ceiling hadn't just been broken, it had been turned into a window for everyone to see through. 5 years later, the modern fairy tale had settled into the gritty, beautiful reality of a long-term marriage. The orchids had long since wilted, and the gala was a memory captured in silver frames. Life in the Rochevance household was loud, busy, and often exhausting. Maya was now the CEO of the foundation, which had expanded to 5 cities. Julian remained at the helm of Miller Roche, navigating the treacherous waters of a fluctuating market. They were a power couple. But behind closed doors, they were just 2 people trying to raise a son and keep their connection alive amidst 60-hour work weeks. "We're missing it, Julian," Maya said one Tuesday night, her voice weary. They were in the kitchen of their brownstone, surrounded by laptops and half-eaten takeout. "Leo's soccer game was today. You were in a board meeting, and I was on a call with the Detroit shelter. We're becoming the people we promised we wouldn't be." Julian rubbed his temples, the gray hair at his temples more prominent now. "Maya, the market is crashing. If I don't stay on top of this, the foundation loses its primary funding. I'm doing this for the mission." "The mission is useless if we lose our family in the process," Maya countered. It wasn't a cinematic argument. It was the quiet, heavy friction of 2 people who cared deeply, but were stretched too thin. They sat in silence for a long time. The realism of their lives was this: love isn't a destination. It's a daily recommitment to not let the world's noise drown out the heart's signal. Julian reached across the table and closed Maya's laptop. She, in turn, closed his. "Tomorrow," Julian said. "No phones, no meetings until noon. Just us and Leo." A few weeks after that conversation, the Chicago winter returned with a vengeance. A polar vortex had gripped the city, turning the streets into dangerous ice-slicked canyons. Maya was leaving the office late, her mind occupied by a budget deficit in the new housing project. As she walked toward her SUV, she saw a shape huddled against the side of the Miller Roche building. It was a young woman, perhaps 22, clutching a backpack like it was a life preserver. She was shivering violently, her eyes fixed on the pavement in that specific hollow stare Maya knew all too well. It was the 1,000-yard stare of someone who has run out of options. Maya's driver opened the car door for her. "Ma'am, the weather is getting worse. We should move." Maya looked at the car, the heated seats, the safety, the luxury. Then she looked at the girl. She saw herself. She saw the resume clutched in a folder. She saw the desperation that the world usually walks past. "Wait a minute, Elias," Maya told the driver. She walked toward the woman. She didn't approach like a wealthy benefactor. She approached like a sister. She sat down directly on the freezing concrete, ignoring the way the cold seeped through her expensive coat. The young woman flinched. I'm moving. I'm sorry." "Don't move," Maya said softly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thermos of coffee she hadn't touched. She poured a cup and handed it to the girl. The steam rose between them, a small ghost in the freezing air. "It's a long night, and it's a cold city, but I know for a fact that the sun eventually comes up." The girl looked at her, confused by the expensive clothes and the kind eyes. "Who are you?" "My name is Maya," she replied, a genuine smile touching her lips. "And a long time ago, I sat exactly where you are. I was waiting for someone to see me. I see you. Now, tell me your story. Let's see what we can rewrite together." The camera would pan up then, moving away from the 2 women on the sidewalk. It would rise past the glowing Miller Roche sign, which now stood as a beacon over the city. The light didn't just represent money anymore. It represented the bridge between two worlds. The glacier had melted, the homeless mom had risen, and in their wake, they had built a world where no one had to sleep in the cold alone.